the thing that stands out to me is like you look at that total and you're like, man, the Suns probably would have gotten like 17 or 18 threes in that game, especially with the way that they can guard guys one-on-one, and that's just not going to cut it.
Gerald, as always, you're a sicko, and you found a way to turn Game 1 of the NBA Finals into the Phoenix Suns and what they have to do. The first one that you talked about, and you just mentioned it, this game once again proves the Suns have to make more threes, or at least take them, because the Celtics shot 42 of them in Game 1.
It was an NBA record for both teams, right? For most three-pointers attempted? Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. The thing that stands out to me is like you look at that total and you're like, man, the Suns probably would have gotten like 17 or 18 threes in that game, especially with the way that they can guard guys one-on-one, and that's just not going to cut it. So you're hoping that Mike Budenholzer is able to come in, like he talked about at his press conference, and emphasize the importance of that shot, how it's going to be part of their offensive philosophy. Because I was looking this up. Since the Suns have been a playoff team again in 2021, out of 16 playoff teams each year, they've ranked dead last, 15th, and 14th in three-point attempts each time. They don't take threes in the playoffs. Bro. Like, they just don't, and you have to change that about your DNA, because look at what, like, the two teams in the finals right now were number 1 and number 2 in three-point attempts all season, and it's not a direct correlation there, but you got to get up a lot of threes in this league now, especially if you're looking at a team like Boston, if you want to keep up. Like, you just can't be down 15, 20 attempts anymore, and that's kind of where the Suns regularly found themselves.
To be fair, if Yuta Watanabe doesn't have a shit,
you know,
we're right there.
You know, if KBD,
I mean, we're right there. 5 more attempts, we're right there.
My boy Chemezi Metu with his beautiful shot would have just took 3-4 more, boy.
You brought up a couple other points too, and it's things that we've talked about, but this finals already is hammering it home. More size and defense on the wing, and the center spot needing to evolve. Do you guys think that this is something that can actually be addressed this offseason? Because I know we've gone through a lot of different machinations of what could trades be, vet minimum guys, and we have more to do, but I don't know that you can fill both of these holes, gaps, with what you're able to do this offseason.
I don't think you can. I don't think you can shore up all these. You might be able to minimize them to some degree, but what I do feel is this. I feel like the Suns need to identify what they think is going to be their identity and what they think is going to work best for them and their team as it's constructed. And then you have to enhance that. If they don't do that and you're trying to mimic another team's style, you're going to fail. Because you don't have the parts or the pieces to be able to do what Boston's doing. And unless you're going to trade everybody and start from scratch and just try to draft these guys, right?
Yeah.
So you have to work with what you have. And I think they have talent. That's not disputed. It's just how can that talent work together to get them to Boston's level? And it's going to have to look a little differently. But as long as you have an identity of what you want that to look like, they can get there.
Yeah. I do think, listen, to get to Boston's level, I mean, that's hard, right? But then do a deeper dive. You just nailed it. Kristaps Porzingis was a guy nobody wanted, right? They got him. They got Drew Holiday because they had Malcolm Brogdon, right? Yep. And so some of the way this came, let's be honest, Derek White. Like, Derek White's a good basketball player.
I still can't believe they gave that to Boston for that.
That's what I'm saying. So the way that came together, it doesn't feel impossible. It doesn't feel impossible for me to say, is there a way to flip Nurk's contract for a guy that maybe is not valued right now, but if you put him in his system, thrives? Because that's what those three guys, with the exception of Drew's fantastic, but a guy like Derek White and Kristaps, they weren't world beaters when they got to Boston necessarily, right? I mean,
there were injury concerns. Yeah,
there were injury concerns. They had their issues. So that's why I think there is some hope. And then ultimately, the end of it is we got to shoot more threes, and it starts with the big three. Like, KD, Book, and Beal have to be the guys that set the tone in that game. I know they're the mid-range mafia, but if they're going to try to win, they better start shooting more damn threes. And if they can start to kind of set the tone there, we have pieces. A guy like Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, those guys are going to shoot threes. I think Budenholzer has to really put a stamp on that shit though, and say we're going to be a 3-point shooting team.
Much like the Mob, the mid range was cool in the 80s and 70s and 80s.
Yeah,
it ain't much of a thing anymore, right? Like I get what you're saying, that those guys have been available, but I haven't seen this front office find them. Right
there, you go. He's gonna fucking.
Yeah, I mean, you go look at.
Back to our fucking conversation yesterday.
I mean, but
I'm exhausted from talking about that last night.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, the availability sure is there, but you have to know what you're looking for and figure out how to make it happen. And we haven't seen that. The guys that the Suns have gotten have been guys that want to come here. Chris Paul wanted to be in Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy that made that happen. Kevin Durant wanted to be in Phoenix. He made that happen. Bradley Beal, for better or worse, wanted Phoenix.
Yeah.
He helped make that happen. I have not seen find that guy that is the diamond in the rough and bring him here. The closest we've seen, campaign back in that bubble season. And you need that this offseason. You need to find that guy that is completely undervalued and rehabilitate the shit out of that. And you're going to find it on the cheap this year.
I would say Torrey Craig too. That first year.
Yeah,
the first
year.
Torrey
And I would
Craig.
say not to that same extent in terms of diamond in the rough type stuff or like value being lower, but I would say that I think the Suns valued Grayson higher than a lot of people did, and they got vindicated in that. But yeah, to your point, like I was watching this series and I was looking at what Kristaps and Al Horford were doing in terms of spreading the floor, holding their own on switches, and protecting the rim. Like they had 5 blocks between the two of them, I think.
Yeah.
You need more athleticism, you need more shooting, you need guys that can hold their own defensively at that spot. And wings, you just need more bigger defensive wings.
Yeah.
Like you can't have Kevin Durant be your go-to designated lockdown guy and, do what he does offensively at age 35 going on 36.
Again, I just think the identity part it's what's, at least with Monty, Monty had a type, right?
Yeah.
And so at least whether you think that's your identity or not, at least he had a type, and that's kind of what he stuck with. So you knew exactly what players were probably going to get more playing time than others, and what he was really looking for. Then when we fast forward to Vogel was like, I wanted to use colorful language.
He was a nice guy,
but listen, man, he didn't know what the hell was going on. Like in terms of identity, like he scrappy as hell, downfall. Like that was just what it was. Like this team was not scrappy as hell. They didn't have a defensive identity. They didn't have an offensive identity to a large extent either. And so, when you're lost like that, it's up to the GM to kind of impose his will to form an identity for your team based on the personnel that he brought in. And I don't think James Jones has really done a good job of that either, especially in the last 2 years, in terms of formulating this roster enough to know exactly what you want to be and who you're trying to identify as. And that's the big project for this offseason is, what is your identity going to be? Mm-hmm. What is Mike Budenholzer's input into that identity? And what kind of players are you going to find to be able to bring into this program and match that kind of DNA? And if they don't do that, they'll find themselves unsuccessful again next year.